There's so much that we don't know about the genesis of someone's work identity. That's the case even with the people that we see, physically or virtually, on a daily basis. We can assume that our coworkers took a certain path to their profession. They had an interest, they went to school to pursue that interest, and they inevitably landed where they are now. But there is such nuance that we miss when we assume. We miss the stories of how building tree forts was a bridge to building systems, how an under-the-table teaching gig formed the critical knowledge foundation for network engineering that would be vital for a lifelong career, and how a fear of math almost led to a completely different career path. Today we follow the unfiltered career path of my friend and coworker Douglas Thide, nuances and all. Here is his story. Hey everyone! Welcome to this next episode of Cut the Small Talk. Here with me today is my coworker and most importantly, friend, Doug Thide. Doug is a network and systems engineer at the tech company that we both work at. And over the course of our friendship, I've learned that in addition to being a super smart systems nerd, he also has a bunch of cool and unique interests that I would never know about if we didn't take the time to connect on a different level outside of work. So, Doug, welcome and thank you so much for joining me on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Okay. So lately, I've enjoyed starting these conversations off with some insight on what you were like as a child, because I've been obsessed with how our childhoods often impact who we grow up to be. So if you're open to sharing, I'd love to know, first of all, where did you grow up? And then what were you like growing up? Like, were you shy, outgoing, teacher's pet, just as nerdy as you are today? Who were you?
That's a good question. So I grew up in Farmingville, New York. It's a nice, quaint little town. Yeah, I used to hang out with a lot of friends when I was growing up. I'd ride bikes around my town a lot, and I was the type of person who got involved with building tree forts a lot.
Building tree forts?
Building tree forts, yes.
Oh, wow.
And I had a couple of friends who were into the same thing with me, and this again is all pre-computers for me, because I had a social life, and then when computers happened, I didn't have a social life.
So how old were you when you were building forts instead of being on your computer?
Anywhere from 10 to 15 years old is maybe even 8 to 15 years old is what I can remember. I just remember the first little fort I can build. It was like a small piece of plywood that I had mounted up on a fence in my backyard, and this grapevine contraption that was with my parents when they moved into the house. And my father built some type of like a roof over the wood to keep the wood dry, but this pole stuck out an additional 3 feet, and that was in the perfect position where it was 2 feet away from the fence. So I put a piece of plywood up there, nailed it down using whatever I knew at the time. I didn't know much. It's just, does it stick up there? Yeah. Does it support my weight? Yeah, great. It's perfect. And I started out with that. I fell down a couple of times. I learned to nail it on differently. I moved into the evergreen tree that we had in our backyard. It was much more stable environment. But after a while, I got complaints from my mom that the tree looked like shit because I was cutting down too many branches.
Where did you get the tools to work on these forts?
3-letter word.
Dad.
Yes.
And so were the friends that you were building these forts with, were they your neighbors?
Yeah, mostly, yeah. One of my good friends down the block was Anthony. We would always get together, and We'd build, I'd invite him up into my backyard tree fort, and we'd spend hours up there just talking about shit, what we wanted to build.
Mm-hmm.
And, from there, we started building a tree fort in the lot next door to us, which was abandoned.
Whoa.
And we built a tree fort starting out at 20 feet up,
What?
25, then about 30 feet up.
Did you bring a ladder?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, uh, no, that's incorrect. We built a ladder out of the tree.
You built a ladder,
but we didn't bring a ladder. There was a 6-foot chain link fence that went right up against the tree, so we'd climb up that chain link fence to a point, and then I actually hammered spikes into the tree, so we used that to climb up.
That is amazing. I remember as a kid, like watching TV shows where the kids would hang out in a tree fort, and I'd be like, that's something that I could never build. It wouldn't even, like, the thought of knowing where to start to build that fort did not form in my brain at all as a child. So that's so cool to hear people actually doing it.
Well, I mean, the thought is as simple as, where do I want to sit? Right. So if you find a branch that looks stable and you jump up on it a couple of times and it resists the, if you don't hear any cracking first and foremost, and if it holds you up there and you step out a little further on it and a little further, and you kind of get the sense that it's a stable branch, and you find another branch that's next to it, well, then, that might serve as an adequate platform. Second off is, if I hammered a piece of wood here, would that be level? If I hammered a piece of wood there, would it be level? Sometimes no. Well, what could I hammer there to make it level? And then what else could I hammer here to make a put here and hammer down to make a platform? And you would build off of that. And just progress from that, and went on, and pretty soon we had 3 different portions of branches that we built on.
That's so cool. Like, I love hearing stories like this because I feel like that experience ties so well with what you do today as an engineer. Like, you like to solve problems. It's trial and error, like seeing not a problem, because wanting to sit in a tree is not a problem, but it's something that you wanted to figure out how to do. And then you went through all these iterations of like different things that either worked or didn't work. And it's literally like the same thing that you do today. So it's interesting how that carried on to your adult career.
Yeah, it's interesting that you draw that linkage, because what I tell you about being an engineer, if you're given a problem to solve, it's up to you to come up with the tools or the methods or the actual approach to solving that problem. So I created a problem for myself, which is, where do I want to sit?
Yeah.
And then I go about testing where I want to sit.
Right.
And then I go about implementing how I'm going to sit down.
Right.
And then I expand upon how I'm going to sit down. Namely, I don't sit on a piece of a 2x4. I sit on a stable piece of plywood. Well, how do I nail down that plywood? Well, I need to make a stable foundation, so on and so forth.
Yeah. I love it. Okay,
I'm sure you do.
I really do. I love the connection between childhood and adulthood. I'm like obsessed. Okay, so moving on from childhood to, I guess, your teenage years, that's when you discovered computers. Is that right?
Yes, computers and Doritos. Yes.
They do go hand in hand often.
Oh, yes.
So how did you get into that world?
I give a lot of credit to my late Uncle Charlie and my father. They used to work on a IBM 386 together. And, my Uncle Charlie worked for Long Island Power Authority, or Long Island Lighting Company, as it was known back in the 80s. And my father worked for the Long Island Railroad. So Uncle Charlie dabbled a lot in computers, and my father wanted to dabble in computers because they were computerizing a lot of the track maintenance equipment at the time. So my father, as the story's been told to me, he brought home an IBM 386 and he had DOS installed on it. And he was trying to tinker with it. And my Uncle Charlie told him, he's like, there's no way that you could mess up this computer that we can't undo. Okay. My dad proceeded to screw it up so fucking royally. My Uncle Charlie asked him, what the hell did you do to this thing? But as a child, I would stand behind them and I would look at all these blue and yellow screens that they'd be going through, and I'd be like, wow, that's just so cool to me. And they would play games on it, and Sleuth and Oregon Trail and whatnot.
Yes.
And you remember playing that too, didn't you?
Yeah, and Amazon Trail. Did you ever play
Amazon?
Yeah.
No, I don't play Amazon Trail. I play just Google Trail and Azure Trail.
Boo. Okay. All right, Dad.
There you go. So, it just kind of mesmerized me a lot that you could put all this effort into a machine and get some entertainment value out of it. And it didn't quite hit me at the time, but there was a whole job or a job field related to doing this that you could make a name for yourself out of. But it really didn't hit home until like 2001, which is when I played my first internet, or 2000, which is when I played my first internet connected game. Or probably even before then. I don't know. I'm riddling dates right now, but I used to play Tribes 1 and then I played Tribes 2. And a lot of people would talk about computer specs at the time. Oh, you got a Pentium 3? Oh yeah, well I got a Pentium 4. Oh yeah, well I got a GeForce 3. I wanted to get involved in the souping up of these computers and getting the best specs and seeing what I can get out of the game. And at the time I started off with a standard gateway machine, and after about a year I had that thing completely apart and put back together several times, and I said, you know what, maybe it's time to get a custom computer. So I went to a local computer show. I bought myself a motherboard, processor, thermal heatsink, the memory. I reused the graphics card because I was cheap, and I put it all together.
Okay, but at this point, did you know how to put it together, or did you just say, I'm going to do this trial and error?
At that point, so I may have skipped a couple of things here, but at that point, when I went out and purchased those components, yes, I knew how to put it together.
Okay.
Between that and playing Oregon Trail, there was a computer class that was offered to me in high school called Computer Network Technician.
Okay.
And it was a 4-period a day class that was offered for 2 years. Grade 11 and then grade 12. And the grade 11 class mesmerized me so much. I learned everything, what the voltages and amperages are on power supplies, how to hook them in, what different types of power supplies do, the pinouts, what do they do, what you need to pay attention to, hard drives, RAID volumes, SCSI versus IDE, video card interfaces, PCI versus AGP at the time. It wasn't PCIe yet. We're talking 2003. How to install an operating. It was a lot of it was taught in class.
Wow.
And they taught everything from the basic operating system, the hardware, to computer networking to fiber optics, um, how unpolished fiber optics attenuate a signal. And you wouldn't think about it, but it's so sensitive. It's incredible, and it opened up a whole world of just amazement to me. And I remember it captivated me so much that there's one module in fiber optics where the actual tool used to complete the lab, it actually angled the fiber optics at specific angles. So you could actually measure the amount of signal attenuation in the signal. So there was some play in the rivet for the caliper or the actual clamp that you would kind of angle the fiber optics there. And it was giving all sorts of different readings. This is crazy sensitive, Danielle. After a while, fiddling with this and trying different things and whatnot, I had enough evidence on my hand that I approached the teacher and I was like, listen, you need a new tool.
Oh my God.
You can't do this. And he's like, I'll just give you the good grade on it. I'm like, no, that's unacceptable. I want a new tool.
Oh my God.
He's like, well, we can't get it from the school district. I'm like, push for it. This is a broken lab.
Wow.
To this day, it still fucking disturbs me.
Wow. Wow.
To be forced to give up on something like that for conditions that weren't your fault just really fucked me up inside, But that was that. It gave you enough, excuse me. It gave you a lot of if you had the right mindset, it gave you a lot of things to think about, and it gave me the leg up, if you will, to take on that class a second year. And this time around, I was actually given a first in Sachem School District history, which was I was actually a paid teacher's assistant through the Suffolk County Department of Labor.
What is that? So were other students in your grade also paid assistants? How did that happen?
Honestly, I don't know.
Did the teacher approach you for that?
Yeah, you know what? I'm a lot smarter now than I was then. I was a stupid fuck back then. And I really wish I paid a lot of attention to the teachers that were involved and everything that was said. I know I have Mrs. Tuttle to thank for that, Mrs. Rigger to thank for that, Mr. Howe to thank for that, and I took a lot of it for granted. I was just a young fuck with a lot of piss and vinegar in me, and I don't think I would have been given a lot of the opportunities without that class.
Wow. Yeah, that's awesome. It seemed to really inform, what you did for the rest of your life. I'm curious to know how your parents responded to this interest. Like, did they know how into it you were at the time?
I remember that. It's clear as a bell. My mother, we took like a introductory stroll through the class when I was in 10th grade, and I said I wanted to do this. And one of the students turned around to me and my mother and said, yeah, there's a lot of mathematics involved in this class. There's logarithms, algorithms, whatnot. And all I heard was grythms in both of them. And I was like, oh shit, that's big. But what it turns out is that algorithms are just a step, or multiple steps of things to do with a fancy name. And logarithms are basically just exponents in math written a different way. So I've never been good at math, especially with algebra at that time.
Mhm.
You know, we were taught to pass in the New York State Regents. We weren't taught to actually understand math.
Mm. Mhm.
It took going to technical school and learning about electronics to actually understand algebra.
Oh,
And to
wow.
this day, I use algebra every day.
Mhm.
So, I don't know if that fully answers your question, but when my mother heard about that, she was terrified, and she asked me the question over and over again: "Are you sure you want to do this? Are you sure you want to do this?" Blah, blah, blah. Like, yeah, you
Well,
know, the whole class is involved about logarithms and algorithms, and it turns out the student probably just read one chapter of a book in a specific lab, found that logarithms and algorithms, it was a hot topic on his head, and mentioned that to us.
mhm.
Because I really didn't. I did one of the hardest modules in that class, which is fiber optics, and I did not encounter
A single
algorithms.
algorithm.
Yeah, maybe a logarithm, but it was like, okay. I was taking tutoring at the time, and okay, I understand how to rewrite a logarithm as an exponent, and I was able to muddle my way through on the math aspect, but it wasn't that hard. So
Mm. Wow.
I'm
Well,
glad I committed to it.
yeah, and it's cool that even though your mom had her concerns, she just let you pursue what you wanted to do. That's a good
Yeah, I
parenting move.
mean, I was I was adamant enough about it, and yeah.
Isn't it
Yeah.
crazy how it seems that children just have this instinctual knowing of what they want and what is good for them? I mean, it comes out as this almost defiance. It doesn't look like it's an instinctual knowing when you're young, but I believe it truly is.
Yeah, I mean, quite a bit of what parents think is best for you,
Mhm.
and what you know is best for yourself.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, you're two different human beings, and
Mhm.
you don't have the same interests
Mhm.
as your mother or your father or
Mhm.
your sister or your brother.
Mhm.
It's what works for you,
Yeah.
and you know it's, it's a little hard for me to hear that some people are just guided into their professions by their parents, and they're completely miserable with it.
Mhm.
I knew I was going headlong into a computer field with mathematics in it, and I'm still daunted by it.
Mhm.
But in systems engineering or network engineering, the math is able to be handled by me.
Mhm.
If I was to go into programming, probably not.
Mhm.
So I'm still aware of that limitation right now.
It's so interesting to hear how much of a negative impact your what you perceive as this math limitation has on you, because I think it's safe to say that most people find that mathematics is a core foundation of like the engineering world in general. But clearly, you've been able to be so successful in spite of your perceived limitation. If you look at the facts, you've been able to achieve what you might think is the unachievable, or what you would have thought would be unachievable as a young child who struggled with math. You're there already today. So I guess in my head, it's a little wild to me that it bothers you. Not only are you like dealing with it every day, since you say that mathematics still kind of plays a role in like your everyday work, but like you're thriving.
you know, I think I'm in, and I can tell you there's quite a bit further that I can go.
Hmm.
I've a lifelong goal for me is to get my CCNA
Mm-hmm.
in routing and switching. I have it. I've had it since 2015.
Mm-hmm.
And just the other day, I was asked, "Why do you only have a CCNA? Why not a
Mm-hmm.
CCNP?"
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's like the child coming home from school and getting a 99 on his test, and why didn't you get 100? It's like, well, fuck you, bitch. But seriously, it's like it's been a struggle. Um,
Yeah.
I started out in support. I worked at a small PC-based IVR company in West Islip. And, I assembled basically computers and installed DVR software on them.
Mm-hmm.
And, working up from there, I kind of filled bits and pieces of jobs, and in between that and the next job at my uncle's lighting store when it existed.
Mm-hmm.
So that would hold me over a little bit. I get my next job and I worked at William Floyd School District as a computer tech. I worked there for about a year, moved on to Cablevision,
Mm-hmm.
which is basically Long Island's equivalent of Comcast. And had a temporary job there for 6 months. Didn't quite meet the total average handle time, so never got hired on as a permanent position. Back to my uncle's lighting store after that. And then I got the job that traversed me from support roles to engineering roles.
Mm-hmm.
And that was at Nerds That Care.
Yeah.
I joined there and proved myself with Cisco networking equipment.
Yeah.
And my boss, James, turned to me and said, "What would you like to be? Support engineer or network engineer?" And I said, I want to be close to the network engineering world.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, "You got it. From here on, you're the network engineer."
Mm.
And I became responsible for our core data center, all our customers' networks, whether I deployed them or not. And an outside role, which was responsibility for all our customers' backups.
Mm-hmm.
And I did the best I could for 4 years, which was pretty damn good. And then I moved up to Massachusetts and kept up my act. And I've been doing network engineering since 2012.
Yeah, man.
In various different roles.
This sounds like a really long fact sheet of all the reasons why you're thriving. So
You know what? It's been a long grind.
Yeah.
Since my first IT job, which was 2006.
Mm-hmm.
If I had gone to school and have been a math wizard,
Mm-hmm.
I think instead of a 16-year journey, it might have been an 8-year journey.
Mm. Well, speaking about work, I wanted to expand on that a little bit.
Sure.
I know I've said to you in the past that I used to be apprehensive about working in tech because of my lack of a tech background, especially in the way we interact sometimes. Like, I feel like I can be a buzzkill when I say, oh, legally you can't do this, or you have to jump through these really annoying hurdles to ensure compliance with this regulation before you complete this work. Well, I wanted to know from your perspective, what makes someone a good coworker to you, or like a tolerable one?
Understanding. And I'll explain.
Mm-hmm.
You, Danielle, you work in compliance. I work in engineering.
Mm-hmm.
My goal is to keep the company connected and online. Your job is to keep the company secure and compliant with best practice regulations that are out in the industry right now.
Mm-hmm.
It is not my job. Your job is not to keep the company connected. So we connect. We talk about issues. And you offer me problems that I can engineer around. Likewise, if I see information that shouldn't exist in our system, I bring it to your attention and you recommend to me the best course of action. And I come back at you with either problems or a yes or no. We hash it out. Mm-hmm. It's the relationship. It's understanding that you're not there to cause a fucking hassle at my job. You're there to make sure the job succeeds in one aspect. I'm there to make sure the job succeeds in another aspect. Mm-hmm. It's both our jobs to make sure that both aspects can meet in a timely fashion. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I have to work with you. And it's not like I have to, like fucking need to work with you. I like working with you. You're an easy person to work with. And you're open to the yays and the nays of the job, and you're open to an explanation. So as long as it can be brought down to your level of understanding, which I'll admit is not as low as you think. So, working together, the working relationship, the collaboration.
Yeah, I do agree that I think it's that understanding is definitely the key ingredient to a good working relationship.
Yes,
I think
understanding.
yes. Yeah, I mean, like our working relationship is so important to me because, you know, I guess like you said, you have this insecurity with math. I also have this insecurity with my lack of technical, you know, knowledge. And the fact that I can go to you and you really make me feel like no question is a stupid question, that makes my working experience 100 times better. So I really appreciate that in you.
And your next question, I'm going to tell you, is a stupid question now.
Wow.
Just because you mentioned
that. What is one crazy dream or goal that you have?
I don't know if I have any goal at this time.
Yeah.
I guess just to, I don't know. I don't know.
Well, we'll go back to it at some point. Not
Sure
today, but if you could live anywhere in the world for a year and not have to worry about leaving anyone or anything behind, where would it be and why?
Florida.
Florida? Why Florida?
Yeah. The nautical nature of being down in Florida, and the weather.
All right. Well, that's a wrap, DJ. Thank you.
Yes.
Do, 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 do.